have really good news, friends. The good news is that I actually started painting today on this oil painting behind me, which I haven't done in like 4 months, like all summer, since before summer started. I've switched over to gouache. I was doing other kinds of work, and this is a commission I've had since April, which has been a while. I'm so overdue in delivering it, and I keep pushing it back, but luckily I have the best art collectors ever, and they're like, take your time. We want good art, not bad art that you're forcing because you're an art block. And I'm like, great, super, love that. I'm like riding a high on a wave right now. I'm hoping to get this painting done before the end of the month, in like the next 2 weeks even. That would be sick. That would be super. That would be stellar. It feels good to be back with an oil painting brush in hand, metaphorically, but also physically. And I'm trying to figure out how to make gouache a part of my normal practice and how to get this new kind of painting set up and figure out what I want to do after this commission is done, because this has been like a looming thing over my head for like ages. And I'm just like, we got to do something cool. We got to do something fun. I think it needs to be bright. I think it needs to be poppy. We'll see. We'll see. When you're coming out of a block and you have your drive again and your motivations back, and you are finishing something big like what I've got behind me, and the work is a little bit daunting, it's good to like ease yourself back into it. I'm like, okay, well, I have a plan for this big painting behind me and I know what I'm gonna do, but also I'm like, it'd be nice to do some smaller things that have less stakes that I could complete in like 2 hours, and that feels like, it just feels better, you know? As you know, I've been learning gouache painting this year. I studied it all summer, spent 90 days learning gouache painting, which was a lot. It was a lot of work, but I feel confident in it now and that feels good. But being a beginner in something, again, unraveled the knot that was like holding my creativity back, I guess, and like let me fail in a way that was safe. And because I was learning something new, that sort of beginner energy really helps. And reading about art has also helped a lot. I feel like this book, we're doing art book club now, so here we are. I feel like this book has really, it's about art crime, but it's about this person who is just so into art itself. He's just so excited about art, and he's so excited about just like his love for art like takes over everything else in his brain to an unhealthy degree, for sure. That sort of appreciation and just peeing your pants excited about art, reading about that and like feeling the sympathy towards that kind of character, that kind of person, it makes you like, oh yeah, I also feel excited about art, not to the extent that I'm gonna steal $2 billion worth of artwork over the span of 10 years, but you know, to a degree that I want to keep making it. It's interesting. Friends and foes, welcome to Art Book Club. My name is Stephanie Scott, and today we're talking about The Art Thief. This book, it's a true crime story about an art thief and his accomplice and his mother. And it's drama. It is just one thrilling heist after another. It's about how it gets caught, and it's about what happens after. It's extremely interesting because this guy's still alive. This guy is out here doing stuff. He's living his life after being, imprisoned several times. And after, you get to see what happens to all of his items, but we're jumping ahead. This book is about the most prolific art thief there has ever been. He's stolen hundreds of pieces of artwork, ranging from sculptures to silver pieces to paintings, anything you could possibly imagine, in a very particular style. It's a little insane to like really wrap your mind around. I want to talk about how this book is written like mechanically before we get into like the plot points, because this book reads a lot like a novel. It has dialogue in it. It has different, I don't know, the way it's written is so affectionate towards the main character. And I'm saying main character, even though this is a real person who has done these real crimes. The thief is Breitweiser, Stefan Breitweiser, or is it Stefan Breitweiser? I don't remember his first name because it's almost never said. The author always says his last name when referring to him. It's about him and his great love, and Katrine, who also stole art with him. The author had gone through all of these interviews with Breitweiser and had interviewed so many people who were part of the trials that went on once he got caught, and had just like spent a ton of time with this guy. He even like took the thief with him to different museums to kind of like see what this guy was seeing when he was going to places and thinking about stealing something. And the way this book is written is so like enamored with the thief that you are almost like rooting for him. And I guess when you're doing a true crime story that is not violent, that is about like an art theft, and especially about an art theft who really, really loves art, you become like affectionate when you're reading this book towards the thief. And then you take a step back and you're thinking, no, stealing art sucks. I don't like this. Like, I make art. I'm an artist, so I feel like reading this book from an artist perspective is just like, if I had a painting up in a museum or at a show and someone just went up and stole it, I would be pissed. I'd be mad. I'd be so mad. Like, even when people try to steal images of my work to put on like products and trying to sell them, that annoys me. But stealing the physical paint, I would be so mad. So there's that feeling about it. And when I think about how it's written, it feels more like a novel because of the style it's written. And I feel like this would be a great documentary. When I finished the book, I looked it up. I was like, has this like started to become a documentary? I feel like it should. And there was an attempt once and it got shut down because the reputation of Brightvisor kind of went from interesting art lover to like dirty thief who can't stop stealing stuff. So, there's that. So when you read this book, it feels like fiction. It feels like something that's just something made up, but it actually happened, and it's interesting. I feel like the way it's written made it really easy to follow. It kind of flows along really well, and there's all of these like points in the drama of it where when chapters end, they always end on this cliffhanger. It's like, and then he gets arrested, and then the next scene is we're in the interrogation room with the current detective and him, and they're talking and they're like fighting basically with words. And it's so like watching TV. It's like watching a movie, that the quality of writing isn't my favorite, but it's good enough and it would get you through the story. One thing I liked about this book is that it felt really well reported on. Every single detail that you could have possibly wanted to know was going to be in there. The beginning first half of the book is all about the thefts themselves. They go into details. They go into such detail that you're like, we're describing the way that screws are being unscrewed and the way that he's walking on creaky floors because the receptionist is downstairs and we'll hear if there's just like a weird amount of silence. And we're going into how Brightvisor notices security and how he notices the shifts of people walking around and how Anne-Katrine would help tip him off if someone was noticing them or not noticing them, and if there was like a lull in the cycle of how a museum works. When you read it, it feels like you're almost there. It feels like you're part of this theft. And I don't know about you, but have you ever gone to a museum and just been like, it would be easy to steal this? Or like you go to like a thrift store or something and you're just like, wow, there's some security here, but there's not like a lot of security here. I feel like almost every person I know has had a thought like this, but we rein it in because we have impulse control and have moral thinking versus Brightvisor has none of this and is like, I'm going to take these objects that I consider beautiful and free them from the confines of a museum so that they will be truly appreciated in my house. Brightvisor and Anne-Katrine had this attic in his mother's house, and this attic held all like 100 plus items that they had collected over the span of a decade, maybe more, a long time. And they would hang art on the walls, they would hang art on the ceiling, they would stuff it under their 4-poster bed, they would put all their sculptures on their like bedside table, and they would stuff things into drawers. They had this huge tapestry at one point, and they were just like crumpling it in a corner because they didn't know what to do with it once they had it. Like, it's interesting to think of this hoard they had, this like room, this treasure cave, this like you go in and you're just like, it's like Aladdin and the sparkles, There's just treasure everywhere. A lot of the times when I was reading this book, I was thinking about like, at what point do you stop collecting a thing? Do you have a collection of your own? Like, do you have something that you collect and you're like, this is interesting and I want to have many of these things? And then have you ever got to the point where you're like, I want to stop collecting these things because I have enough of it? I feel like I've collected things in the past. Let's see, like it started with when I was a child. I collected Pokemon cards. I had like binders of them. That was great. I collected model horses because I was an equestrian and I liked those. I've collected. What else have I collected? I'm looking at all my plants right now. That seems like a collective. I've collected plants. I have a small art collection, but it's nothing compared to the need and the drive that Brightvisor had to just continuing to take things and continuing to have them so no one else could appreciate them. And he thought he was taking care of them, and he thought he was like freeing them from these spaces. Having a collection is strange. You want to have enough of something that it becomes a collection, more than 3 items essentially, and you curate that collection so it looks good and it pleases your eyes and it's fun to look at and to play with and touch and all those things. And then I feel like there comes a point where you're just like, I've had enough, or maybe your interest changed. And for Brightvisor, that's never changed. It's always about art, and it's always about his particular taste. He thought he was going to have a point in his life where he might return these items. At least that's what he said during some of these trials. And I just think that would never be true if he hadn't gotten caught. I'm not going to tell you the details of all the thefts, because if you want to read this book, I think that's the most interesting part of where he went. And if you get the print version of the book, there's a map of where all the thefts happened. But I will tell you about the character of Brightvisor, of this person who just truly loved art. It starts off when he's a little boy and his father, who is pretty wealthy, breaks up with his mother, and then suddenly all the beautiful things that they had in their house are gone with his father, and he has no contact with this man for the majority of his childhood. The thief, he loved those beautiful things, and so this like start of collecting was like, I want to make a collection that was better than the one that my father had, that he then took away from me along with his love, right? The psychological part of this is so intense. So that's how it begins. But once he has the thrill of taking it, he's like, oh, I'm good at taking things. I'm good at noticing the weaknesses. And he even gets a job as a security guard to like learn more about being a thief, which is amazing. And you're just like, you just set your destiny set in stone here. You were never going to be anything other than someone who steals art. And I don't know, it's interesting. He had a real taste, and that taste developed as he was stealing things and as he was curating his own collection. It was a lot of Rococo things. It was a lot of like European paintings from a specific time range. It was a lot of ivories and silverworks and different things that you could use as tools, silverware, things like that. And his taste developed and it changed. When you look at all of the items, which you can see pictures of basically every single item he's stolen on record, the things he wanted changed, and the size of the things changed, and smaller things are much easier to steal because you can put it in a bag, you can put it under an actual trench coat, which I think is hilarious. When you read it, you're just like, oh, he had this like giant overcoat trench coat thing, and he wore it to like all of his thefts, and he would just like hide paintings in his pants or under the coat or in a bag or in his girlfriend's bag. Or it's just like, it's inconspicuous, but also you're just like, this seems really obvious as someone who is like a thief. Anyways, he had all this taste. He had all these things that he really loved. And when you look at the collection as a whole, you're not looking at the most expensive pieces of art in art history. You're not looking at the most famous ones. In fact, a lot of the pieces, when I looked at all of them, were ones I've never seen before, but also have never come under my radar as important pieces of art history. And a lot of the pieces I looked at when I was looking at the collection, I was like, I don't like a lot of this. Like, this isn't to my taste. From here, we can play a fun game where if you were to have any piece of art from anywhere in the world and have it as your own piece of art, like to be part of yours in your collection, and then let alone having like dozens and dozens of other pieces, like what kind of collection would you curate? I haven't done this, like I don't have anything to present to you, but I was like, that's interesting. What would I love to have? And you know, when I first think of this, I'm like, oh, I love Corot. He's one of my favorite painters. Italian landscapes in particular were my favorite of his. And I love Rosa Bonheur, who we just read a book about, Art is a Tyrant. And I was like, oh, wow, if I had like the horse fair in my living room, that would be incredible. It'd be too big because no building I've ever lived in has had a room big enough for the horse fair. But the idea is fun to think about. And it's, I think, a fun dinner topic conversation to have at some point. On the flip side, I think about it and I'm just like, man, it's a bummer he stole all those pieces, because after he got caught, his mother cleared out their space where they were hoarding all the art, and a lot of the art got destroyed or damaged beyond repair. A lot of it got saved and was able to be recovered, but a lot of it is something that no one will be able to see ever again because it's just gone. And I think about the kind of art that is never seen. I went to a museum in Utrecht recently that had a small display of work that I thought was wonderful, but it was on the cages that are used to store art, in like humidity controlled, climate controlled spaces. And it was like, this is one of the cage of thousands of that we have of just artwork that people have donated to the museum, or we've collected or acquired in some way. And some of these works haven't been seen in 50 years because they're in storage, and some of them we rotate through frequently, and some of them are still damaged and we don't have the funds to fix them. And I start thinking about things like, okay, what about all the art in the world that's in storage and that is never seen? And if you ever look this up, it's a lot. Like, a lot of work is just in storage units being shared by nobody. That's also like so sad, but also museums don't have, like, they have money but not that much money to show everything, and not enough space. There's a lot of art in the world. I don't know, you ever think about that? It's interesting. This book made me think about a lot of these topics. It made me think about how much I really love going to my art museums and being able to see stuff, and how much I disagree with with Breitweiser's philosophy of I'm freeing the art from museums, and bringing them to a person who really appreciates the work and who gets to see it every day. And I think museums do a really cool thing. One thing I really liked when I was in Berlin recently, I guess 2 years ago, was that on all of the labels of all the art pieces, it showed you the name of the piece and who made it and where it was. But then it also had a section on where and how the item was acquired, and how it got to this museum in this space, and if it had been wrongfully acquired, if it had been attempted a return yet, and what the result of that was, and why they still had it, if the answer was we don't want it anymore, or like things like that. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. What do y'all think? When I think about my own personal collection of work, I have pieces that I have inherited from family members. I have pieces that I've bought with my own money. I have pieces that I've made because I'm an artist. And I try to trade them out. I now have a collection big enough that I have some pieces of art that I have bought, and they're now in my studio in storage because they aren't on my walls at the moment, and I filtered them out. And that brings me back to the question of, like, how much is too much in a collection? Like, when you don't have enough wall space for everything in your collection and you have to start like rotating things in and out. And then I start thinking about things like, what if you stop liking a piece that you've bought in the past? A lot of times when I'm talking to people who collect art, they're like, yeah, I'll buy a piece and I think I'm going to have this forever and I'm going to love it forever. And then sometimes they buy a piece and they're like, oh, I like this for this setup that I've got right now with these pieces of furniture and this kind of joy it brings me, but it's not a forever thing, and they will resell things or put it away in storage. It's interesting to be someone who makes work to belong in collections like that. I make work for other people to buy and to have in their homes, and to sometimes it's custom and sometimes it's exactly what they want, and sometimes it's like this piece and I work on it for ages, and sometimes it's just something I've made up on my own and they're like, that's it, that's my painting. And I wonder how many of my paintings will go into storage at some point, and how many of my paintings will survive my own lifetime. I've already had pieces that have gotten destroyed, not because I've chosen to destroy them, but because something has happened to them. And it's almost melancholic to think about that future, but also I'm like, maybe I'll have a piece of artwork that I make that will last several hundred years, and maybe people will continue to enjoy to see it for the non. Or maybe it'll get stolen. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. So that's the kind of things I think about when I read this book. I really enjoyed reading this book. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's interesting. I think it would be better as a movie if someone wanted to make that at some point. We probably won't see one for a while because the people whose lives are impacted by it are currently living. So maybe in like 100 years, you'll see a movie about the greatest art thief of our time. One last thing that I thought was interesting about this book is that you know that Bright Visor gets caught, and he gets caught several different times for several different things. And then finally, there's like the big time he gets caught, and he gets just like he's like in jail for like 2 months, and then he finally like admits to all of his crimes, and it's like an international thing, and it's wild. It's interesting to read a true crime novel when you already know what happens at the end, right? He gets caught. That's the only real solution to the, or I guess end to the story. It's not like, and then all of the things that he stole are still gone somewhere and nobody knows where he is or what happened or anything. Like, you only know the story because he gets caught. And throughout the book you hear a couple of other smaller stories of smaller art thefts that have like are one or two items. I learned that Picasso once hired someone to steal art for him. That's wild to me. I learned that from this book. You know, you never know the true story about something, even if you've read about him over and over and over and over and over again. I'm like, that's fascinating. It was weird to read a true crime story about art. I don't normally read this genre, but I liked it. It was good. I would recommend this book to anyone who is like, I want to read a true crime story that's not about murder or violence or money, really, because this book wasn't even about money. It was about art. Yeah, 4 stars, 4 stars. We have the next book for October is another short and sweet book. This is a Giacometti portrait. This is a really interesting interview. We're doing a lot of like biographies lately, and this one is almost like a biography. This book is about James Lord and Giacometti. It's about a time when James Lord gets drawn as a model for the artist Giacometti, and he writes about the experience of being a model for this artist. I think a little more than a dozen sessions that the artist goes through, and each time they are done with for the day, the author will take a picture of the portrait and he puts it in this book, so you can see the portrait as it evolves through the story happening. And I think it's really interesting. It's one of the most unusual art books I've ever read, and I'm stoked to read it again. If you want to read this book with us, you should join us on October 13th. We're going to be here on Twitch doing this live. Hopefully Jennifer can meet us this time. She wasn't here today because she got COVID, so send her some well wishes. I hope to see you here on Art Book Club. You can find me at stephaniescott.art or on Twitch at cheerssteph. And that's that. Make good choices, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic day. This has been Art Book Club. Toodles. Goodbye. See you later.